Welcome to the show today. Today I have Peter Kunszt on the show, and he's the lab and development lead at Dynatrace. And I'm very excited to talk to you today, Peter, and dive a little bit more into your story and the fun things that you guys have done so far. Also at the company that you co-founded with Matt and the others, and what you guys are up to now. So, Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daniel.
So let's maybe start with the story a little bit. Can you share about one or two moments that you feel along the way really shaped you as a human being? You feel really shaped you as an entrepreneur and as a leader.
I have a background in physics, in theoretical physics, and I was a pretty long time also in research. And in that time, there was you have to do a lot with very, very smart people who are usually smarter than you are, which is a good thing. And this is one of the things that I try to keep, to surround myself with as many smart people as possible. And here the really defining moments were I was in the US for a postdoc at the Johns Hopkins University. That was a really great experience. Had really great mentors there. And when I came back and worked at CERN for 5 years, also for the first time as a group leader, there I also had very nice people, both in terms of other group leads to help me, but also in my own team who pushed back and told me things that I did not want to hear. Or when I really made mistakes, they were super good in actually giving me this kind of feedback. So these were really two things that I'm still looking forward to today. That first of all, I have people that are really, hopefully, much smarter than me, because then I can learn from them. And then, of course, trying to make sure that I get feedback also on everything that I do. So these are really defining things, as you say. Yes.
They're really, really powerful, and it takes a certain level of awareness and acceptance, to get feedback like that. First of all, to even hear feedback like that, and then to actually receive it and do something constructive with it. So that's a really powerful one. Now, I'm always really curious about what's driving people. So, maybe we can talk a little bit about Qumran, we can talk a little bit about Mao, we can talk about the red thread of your life, wherever you'd like to go. But what I'm most interested in is, what is it that drives you at the essence? What is it that gets you up in the morning every day?
Yes. So what is it that I think I'm really mostly driven? Also, this is based on my background as a researcher and scientist, to find out or to find solutions to interesting problems. So first of all, what is really the motivating factor for me to really scratch the surface and see how things work, how are really things done. And then me, really, I'm a techie in that respect. So I like to tinker and I like to solve stuff that is not obvious. And this is what keeps me up also. And this is what keeps me ticking under the shower and nagging at a few issues. And this goes then also through now to more entrepreneurial things, where you have to deal with teams and managing them and making sure that they can perform. And that's also super interesting. It's of course very different from a technical problem, but this is just as interesting. I also like to read a lot, of course, and be thrown. I like when people throw books at me, or links with TED Talks or anything that's really fun and interesting, where people have experience with really, really difficult problems that they have faced and solved. That's the type what I find very motivating for myself as well. My father is actually a physicist, so this was not an easy choice for me to go to physics as well, because it was true. He was kind of always trying to micromanage me. So which are the examples that you do? And of course I tried to push back. So this is where things also came early for me, that I wanted to be totally independent and prove things that I can do it myself. And that's also kind of a driver that there is no problem that cannot be solved. And of course, these are the things that I try to do, of course, together with other people. So I'm not the kind of guy who is going and then locks himself up and does it on his own. It's quite the opposite. So that's what I said before. I want to talk to people who then can help me with these kind of things. So these are motivating factors for me as well.
That makes a lot of sense, especially also because of your background, obviously, and also because of the parenting, of course, in terms of the drivers, but also the solving interesting problems. I'm curious about that. What is it that, so let's say you have a very, 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 I mean, on the technical side, but also business side, you have very challenging problems, so to say, or challenges. And you get to work on them, solve them, play around with them. What is it about that activity, I guess, that excites you so much?
Well, I guess this is one of these things that I'm susceptible to being in a having also read up on the psychology of this myself, because I have the same issue. I need to motivate people to do and to perform really, really well, right? And for myself, it is really this, that if I can find something that I can, bite myself into and really, okay, let's shake it until it's loose and I have solved it. That is kind of gratifying if you really can't do it. And even if it takes weeks, it's even more gratifying because it took you so long to fix it. And then finally, if you can fix it, that's really a great feeling, to have. So this is something that I'm also looking for, so that I get rid or automate away all of the things that are not like that, that are more menial or things that are repetitive. Then okay, I do that. Of course, it has to be done. But then let's automate it. Let's make it sure that this doesn't bother neither me nor anyone else. And this is also a big driver, because then we have, all of us with my team, then we have time to do the interesting things and the fun things, which then keeps you up at night and, you tinker with it and try to find alternative routes. And this has been also the case, when you are growing from or you're founding something small, doing a startup. Okay, how do you do it properly? How do you get all of the environment behind you? That's quite cool if it then happens. And then how do you grow? So also in Dynatrace, we have now the really huge challenge to grow a relatively small team to a large team of 200-300 people, interacting with other teams in other countries, so a total of 1,000 all over. And that is a growth pain, that is pretty interesting and very, very important, both in the human and the organizational aspect. So lots of fun there too. Not always, great fun, because there can be difficult moments. But if you solve those as well, it is very gratifying.
It's really interesting. Like, there's two specific pieces that I really heard out of this, and the first one is that the easy stuff is boring, so to say. Automate the easy stuff, the routine. Get rid of that. Just show me the interesting stuff, the exciting stuff, which means the challenging that can't be just solved like this. No, it requires a lot of effort and a lot of thinking and working together and doing all those kinds of things. That's one thing. And the other thing that I heard is that it's not just about the end goal. It's a lot about the journey as well. You kind of said, it's even more gratifying when it's sort of like a week-long journey than just a couple of days of juggling and, oh, great, we figured it out. Let's move on to the next thing. That's really interesting, because sometimes, in this context of anything, but mostly in business as well, we're so focused about getting stuff like done or accomplishing or KPIs or whatever, that we sort of like neglect the journey of itself. And then the journey itself, the time you invest in the journey, it's actually not an investment then, it's you spend time, you waste time, so to say, on the journey to get the result if you neglect to, I guess, have fun on the journey and really like put yourself into the journey fully. And that's just something really interesting that stood out there, that I heard from you. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely correct. So this is really the thing that I also try to work together with my teams, that don't just fall into a routine, and then you come to work and okay, but what's the next topic? And I do that. No. Try to really bring yourself in and pick out the items where you look under the hood really, And so in software development, we are of course working in a super agile environment. I'm a big driver of this, because if you do the journey right, if you do the constant problem solving exercise right, then you have to change it along the way, because you are learning new things also on the way how you do it. And the agile approach is mapping perfectly into this. So we have we're also working in 2-week cycles, and then that every 2 weeks we then look back and say, okay, how did it work? Did it really happen? Or what is not working? Or what are things that we really need to change? And getting into that kind of routine keeps you alert, because okay, that was bad, or this kind of didn't work. You note it down, and then in 2 weeks' time there will be time to reflect on this and discuss and improve. So it helps you if you already during your path of resolving problems, you already put yourself into this kind of mindset of not wanting to do the things that are not fun. So you really want to get rid of those problems, and these are problems in themselves. So sometimes we have to also break a bit and say, okay, we cannot really continue with the technical problems. We have to solve an organizational one, like team growth, like splitting up people, because now we have new things to do, or we cannot meet deadlines because of certain issues. Then that's a different kind of problem, which is just as interesting to solve, so to speak. So that's it's important to face both, because these two things are super closely correlated. Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting, because like stuff can get really mundane, and also, performance is a big reflector of that. If people just come into work to get stuff done, so to say, performance, maybe they work through a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, performance has nothing to do with working through a lot of stuff. It had everything to do with the actual outcome of the work. And that can be a huge difference in terms of how people approach their work. So I really appreciate sharing that. Another thing I want to dive into a little bit is some of the lessons that you learned along the way. You've built tech organizations. You've been part of an incredibly fast-growing company that you then sold to this big American company. And I want to learn a bit more about some of the lessons that you learned along these journeys, and what was some of the context around these lessons?
Yes. So for myself and also for my work, the lessons, the biggest lesson learned is, of course, that there are times when you need to do things on your own, but also but most of the time you have to find a team to work with, and the people that you choose to work with is kind of totally of the essence. You have to really find out who is compatible with your way of work and your way of thinking. It's pretty much like choosing a wife. It has to match really well, and because then you don't need to explain yourself too much to your teammates. They will understand you better. And also aligning the goals both in business and also in technology is important, right? Another lesson learned is also that people perform much better if you don't force stuff down their throats. Especially like me, if you like to surround yourself with smart people, you need to be prepared to convince them. And those guys are opinionated, I can tell you. They're like, that's bullshit, And but that's also fun, if you are like to engage in conversation and, okay, no, let me show you, this is da-da-da. And that's really also super important that I learned this lesson many times, that just bullying people into certain things works for a short period of time. And after that, you get a huge pushback, and which slows you down tremendously. So sometimes it's not so easy, because it's not even your kind of fault or benefit or whatnot, because there may be these kind of disagreements within some team. And then it goes back to process, because now this is also the advantage of the agile methodology, that you can say, okay, guys, whatever, we try this approach for 2 weeks, and then we try the other approach for the other 2 weeks, and then we see which one is better. So instead of just making one person unhappy, let's find a good Swiss compromise. and then we can really properly move ahead and have a lesson learned for everybody, because this is also what the smart guys like. I mean, at least those people that I like to surround myself with, is to learn stuff, and mostly this is only possible through failing. So this is also another thing that happened to me a lot, that of course you fail, but don't take this as a negative thing, right? I mean, that's actually the only best way to advance. And this is also something I try to bring and kind of coach with my younger smart guys, that motivate them to fail, really, because this is not a bad thing. It's just that you have to fail fast, and then you learn also much more from it. And yeah, so until I had that point, that I was so at this point that I realized is, no, it's not a bad thing to fail, and I don't have to be afraid of this, or then justify my results with anything. Oh, it wasn't really this. No, let's look things into the eye and understand really what happened. So what were the real reasons? Look under the hood, and then analyze it. It's really essential. And in terms of technology, that is a triviality. Actually, the lesson there is you cannot age out of it. I mean, I'm not that young anymore, but technology changes so quickly in our sector of software anyway, that if you don't keep up to date constantly, also somebody with 25 years old can become old very fast. And somebody with who is almost 50 like myself can still stay young, because if you go through the effort of keeping up to date, then you can play with everyone else. It's not like you turn old. It's not like sports where you really don't have a chance. So that's also something that for me, when working with people, when hiring with people, it doesn't really matter what kind of age you have, as long as you have this mindset that you want to keep up to date, you're interested, you're curious, you want to know the new stuff. So I don't have to tell you that, okay, read this blog. It's quite the opposite. You can tell me that, hey, I found this article on the web and please do that. So this kind of mindset is super important. And some people have it out of the box, and others are really need a lot of motivation and experience also to get there. But it's irrespective of age. Actually, it's really interesting. So in this kind of technology sector is not true that you have a certain age progression in certain things. That's also kind of a good realization for me, because then I can say, okay, cool. If I work hard enough, I can keep up to date also with the technology. And it's important, because people don't respect you if you cannot talk technology with them. So that's also important.
Very, very true. Yeah, these are some great points, and it also directly leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned sort of like I guess the kinds of qualities you look for in the people when you bring people on board, when you hire people, when you build teams. Tell me a bit more about that. So first, what are like the specific, and I know specific is difficult because it's very intangible stuff mostly, but what are sort of the key things that you look for in terms of criteria? And then the second thing is, how do you know when you see them?
Yes. So the key things, yes, I mentioned already some of that. So basically the curiosity, right? The mindset that people believe that with hard work they can achieve anything they want. And it's not just, I'm good. Yeah, okay, prove it. So this is something that I like, people who are really passionate about things. So if there is something, that there's a project, they talk about it, because if you are like this, that you like problems to be solved, and not just there is a problem, it's not my fault, blaming others for it, then you will be talking about this all the time. You will be explaining it. Hey, this was interesting because I tried this, I tried that, and this didn't work, and this is so cool because then I found this problem. So these are then things. If somebody gets a trigger, or we ask him, okay, but how did you do that? And they just start. There's a kind of a floodgate opening, all of this information comes out, that's a great indicator that this guy has passion. You know, he's really interested in what he's doing. And it doesn't even matter if this passion is in a technology that we don't use, because then I know, okay, fine, you will learn whatever I give you in 2-3 months, you will be just as good as the other guy. So this is really what I'm usually hiring for, is more that like the attitude towards solving problems and work. Then okay, so you know, you have all these certifications, because certifications get old. This is why you know, all these certification industries are going good, because you need to get recertified, of course, almost every year, because things happen, new things happen. And that's exactly the case as well. So if you have an experience and a CV, you know, that shows you what you did, and it's very, very cool. I'm focusing on the lessons learned of the person. So I'm kind of asking the same questions that you just did. Okay, so what did you learn from that? What is your outcome? What would you do differently? And people who resonate with me, they will, you know, start to talk about it, and you can't shut them up, basically. And people who are more like, how to call it, maybe static or something, you know, where you say, okay, this is what I do, and I do the next thing, and I'm good at it. There you have to pull it out. You know, you have to kind of ask them one thing after the next until you get all of these things out of them. So you can gauge it pretty easily. What kind of persons you're looking for. Also in youngsters, so people come out of university, and if they then come and talk to us about our technology, we explain, you know, we do this cool stuff. And those guys who then ask a lot of questions back, okay, that's really interesting, but you know, I didn't understand, how does that work? How does this work? And I also try to motivate them to ask, so that they, you know, after a while, they're not nervous anymore, and then ask back. These are exactly the people that you know, have then a potential to grow out to be really, really good. So these are kind of the mechanisms I'm using.
This is a really interesting way of doing it, because what you get to do is not just sort of like qualify for skills and sort of like background, but you're really able to make sure that people are able to communicate. You know, people are able to talk to each other. People are able to, and not just able, but also willing. You know, because some people, you know, they're willing to communicate. They're pretty good at it. But they would rather just be buried the whole day long in a basement, you know, because they just want to. But let's be honest, in today's world, it doesn't work that way. You have to talk to other people. You have to be, you know, there, and even if it's just through Slack or whatever, but you have to be very communicative, and you have to make a conscious effort to, you know, actually doing the work, so to say, is only one aspect of the job. Yeah. And then there's a whole other part to it, so to say, that is very, very important as well. And you're able to qualify for that in this way as well, by looking for, you call it passion, by looking for passion, because, and I think it's also about how people communicate about something. And I guess some people are passionate about projects, others are passionate about a programming language, and others are passionate about something else. But it doesn't matter what it is. Everybody has something that they're usually passionate about. And it's not about, oh, you have to be passionate about this thing. No, it's not about that. It's whatever they're interested in. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even have to be in a context of the actual job directly in terms of programming language, for example. It can be outside of that, you know, as you said before. But they have to have a certain, I guess, passion for, you know, whatever they're involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will also allow them to be, as you say, great communicators, not just talking themselves, but also listening to the other guy. Because if you're interested in a solution or something, you will listen, and you will try to understand what the other person is telling you. And this is where I had other lessons learned, you know, where sometimes you find these guys who are super passionate, but then it turns out that they are not necessarily willing to listen to other people's opinions. And some of these things turn out to be the case later, you know, that you don't necessarily see in an interview, because that just happened to us recently. You know, somebody can tend to be super agreeable, and then, oh yeah, sure, I mean, yes, let's do it this way. But then when they actually do it, no, it didn't take into consideration what the other person was saying. So this is then both two sides of the same coin, that you have to bring this interest and inherent self-motivation, but also being a team player is a different story. That there you have to be also interested in the other person. You want to know the other person's opinion. So that's also this kind of soft skill that I'm also trying to look for. That's a bit more difficult to get in just a few hours of an interview process. But this is what we have then the actual trial periods for.
Absolutely, yeah. Usually you can only figure that out once actually people are working together. Yeah. And talking about working together. So, and especially now in the process of growing this organization, that is, sort of like, it's not a small team. It's it's a medium-sized team to actually a very large team. In this process, you bring all kinds of different profiles on board as well. So you got the project manager, and I need to talk to the developer, I need to talk to the architect, I need to talk to the business people, and so you got the whole beautiful mix of soup there. And so how do you make sure then that people actually understand each other, because they all speak a different language, not like German or English or Spanish, but they all speak a different business language, so to say, or tech language. And how do you make sure people actually are able to understand each other, work together well, perform together as a team?
Yeah, so that's an ongoing item. So there's not something that you can say, okay, that's the magic. Because at the end of the day, people need to know each other and trust each other, right? And this is not that easy if, of course, things change. You need to work with other people. Suddenly you hire new people. You have to reestablish that trust continuously. What doesn't work well is if you do these kind of conversations remotely. So we are working also, across Switzerland, Spain, Austria, Poland, and so on. So when it comes to first setting up things, this has to be in a workshop locally in person. That's also one of the things that is super important. You have to go for a beer together in the evening to know, how does this guy tick. And this helps also to establish a common language, because also fact that human communication largely is nonverbal. So if you just have email and Slack, that's not at all enough. And also single kickoff is just as good to get people on the same page. It doesn't mean that everybody has really understood everything, because you figure out, this has happened to us regularly, that you figure out after a year that in the same company with the same term, you use a word, it has meant different things to different people, and you just figure it out much later because something happened where you don't understand what's going on. And so it's really about asking back, understanding, and doing these things. And with technologists, it's also not easy, because those guys, after a while, they say, "Oh no, I don't want to go in another meeting. I want to do stuff now." And at the same time, yes, you want to do stuff now, but what if you do the wrong thing and then you work for nothing? So it's rather have a meeting now and explain and have a workshop and understand that you do the right thing, then you do something, and then it turns out that this is not what we need. So this is also my kind of coaching role in that sense, that when setting up these teams, that of course at first you don't have a choice. You have the people that you work with who were sometimes very good in a position that they had up till now, but as you grow, maybe they are a little bit out of the comfort zone and need to grow into a new role. And of course then you have to see how this can happen, and this takes also several iterations. So in this growth, there are two aspects, right? One is you can grow your own people into certain positions that they really get the experience in time, or you can of course hire outside talent, and you need to do both, actually. This is not something that you can choose one over the other, and both have advantages and disadvantages. And it's a constant effort to keep all of these guys talking to each other and really telling them, you're one team. It's not like I, the business guy, tell you, the developer, or you, the user experience person, or whoever, how to do things. You're one team. At the end of the day, it's the customer who needs to get something delivered that they're super happy with and willing to pay for on a yearly basis, because this is our business model now. You get a yearly subscription, right? So it has to be super cool. And the customer is the person who you need to focus on. And this has to be understood by everyone. and then you play as a team and you play on your strengths. And of course, people have their focus. Okay, the business guy looks at what does the customer need? How do we do the licensing? What is really the competition doing, and so on. So these are the guys that we call product managers. And then there is the usability expert who then designs. Okay, so how is this product then really being used? So we have a web-based product, but also something that operators have to use. So what is easy, what is difficult? We don't want to write manuals like that, hopefully. So it should be as easy as an iPhone. Of course, it's not always possible with a complex product, but that's then the aspect of the usability guy. And then the developers, of course, they then have the most difficult task of actually making it happen. And what I always say is that you cannot just throw stuff over the fence from one to the other. So all of these people have to understand all of the aspects of the other guys. Even the business guy has to understand the difficulties of development and what is feasible and what is not feasible. And this you can only achieve through constant discussions and understanding and listening to the other guy, and being interested in the issues of one another. And that's what makes us a strong team. And to build these kind of teams is also fun and challenging. And sometimes it happens that you have to exchange a few people because they're not compatible. This happens all the time. But so luckily we have these iterative cycles, and we can then really approach items from these perspective. So
I love the fence metaphor that you mentioned there. You know, you can't just throw stuff over the fence, but you actually have to understand each other, even if it's very far away from you, so to say. But you have to understand the basics of how that stuff works, because otherwise you come up with, let's say, great ideas that are completely not feasible on the other side. I mean, there's always, of course, gray area of, okay, somebody says that's impossible, and then you make it possible, but at the same time, you have to understand each other's basics. So the last question I want to ask is a little bit more zoomed out and far ahead. So let's say you're now 80 years old and you're sitting on your rocking chair and you're looking back at your life and looking back at the world, and you look at the world today now as you're 80 years old. What is an important change that you would want to see in the world at that point?
That's a very good question, actually. So basically, what I hope that we can achieve is to really have changed how we structure organizations, and even, let's say, even how we teach people at that time. I don't think this will happen by the time I'm 80. But if I can contribute to this mindset, especially with the younger guys, that they then realize, okay, really the way to go is not with hierarchies, but really with self-organized teams. And failure is not bad, but it's a way to learn. Also, how we learn and how we teach currently in schools is driving me nuts, because I see it with my own kids, and it's so much focused about, oh, you must not fail, and so much about your grading, and you have a teacher who is then still preaching from the top, like for the monks in the Dark Ages. It's terrible. And then you get these youngsters out of school and have to really work hard to readjust their mindset that no, fail often, fast, and then learn from it. And people are then so afraid, and they don't come with issues or come with issues late. So I want to be able to look back and say, hey, I managed to change many people's understanding of this, and because of this, I'm contributing for this to happen, also in the workplace, but also in other areas of society. So I really think this is the only way forward to really scale, actually. And if you are moving towards, I don't know how many billion people on the planet, you have to establish these kind of processes. I mean, the kind of dictatorships don't work. Of course, they work if you have a fantastic dictator, but let's look at history. How often did that happen? The benevolent dictatorship, yeah, that's better than democracy, but it's a bit risky. So you have to come up with mechanisms that are also more human, more understanding, more defining also. And if I managed to have inspired a few people to contribute to this, then this is exactly fantastic.
I love that. It's very powerful, you know. And just a quick note on what you said about dictatorship. It just reminded me of a quote from Richard Branson, who said, "I believe in benevolent dictatorship, given I am the dictator."
Exactly.
So yeah. So, but anyway, I thank you for sharing this. I really appreciate it. It's always a really, really inspiring discussion at the very end. And so what we're going to do is below this video, we're going to link to some sources, to the company page, of course, to the social media profiles as well. So people can, on the one side, you know, keep in touch, follow sort of like the exciting stuff that you guys are up to, but also connect with you, because I know you guys are growing like crazy. So you need, you're bringing on board a lot of talent, and there's lots of other opportunities coming along as well. So yeah, you know, there's all opportunities to connect with you, Peter. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for being on the show, Peter. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Daniel.